Hey everyone, Professor Coca here, recording at my home location. So I haven't been feeling particularly great. I took a COVID test. I am negative, but unfortunately I do have some nasal congestion, etc. So I want to keep us going. So we are going to have our class, um, online for Tuesday and Thursday. And I want you guys to go into Canvas and go ahead and print out Chapter 2 and print out the first 4 pages. So chapter 2, Thinking Like an Economist, you're going to fill this worksheet in that I think some of us may have started. You're going to fill in the circular flow model. You're going to submit that online. And then you're going to fill in the production possibility frontier here. And then you're going to do this production possibility frontier as well. So I just want you guys to go ahead and complete these worksheets. I'm going to walk you through it and then submit it online, and then that will get us through chapter 2. So when I come back next Tuesday, we'll be able to jump into chapter 3. All right, so let's get started here. So I know some of you, we already started this chapter. Generally, the way we want to think about this chapter is we're trying to explain how an economist thinks. What is the approach of an economist? So I proposed a question to you guys: why don't people fall off the planet? And obviously, everyone knows it's gravity. But how do we come up with that? How do we know gravity? Obviously, it's obvious to us, but we were taught this in school, and our teachers taught it to us. But who taught our teachers? And then most of you have come up with Isaac Newton. So Isaac Newton, the father of science, made an observation in nature. He saw an apple fall in the apple orchard. Maybe it fell on his head, maybe it didn't. But we just want to figure out the power of observation, to literally just be out in nature, observe something, make a hypothesis, and then test that hypothesis. So economists are like scientists, and scientists make observations. Scientists use the scientific method. They make an observation, they hypothesize, they test it, and then if they can verify their hypothesis, then it becomes a theory or a fact. So the economics is the same thing. The only difference is with an economics person, we're observing people, we're observing the economy as opposed to observing outer space or nature or things of that sort. So the power of observation is definitely very powerful. Isaac Newton observing an apple falling in the apple orchard also explains why our solar system exists, and why we have life on Earth and all that. So it's amazing such a simple observation can really have big time implications. So for us as an economist, it actually is more complicated to be an economist because we're dealing with human beings as opposed to nature, where it's more mathematical, where 2 plus 2 always equals 4. And that's why science is very nice, because it either works or it doesn't work. Now in economics, we're dealing with human beings, and we're dealing with people's emotions, and people don't always think rationally, right? We have a lot of different emotions going on in the economy. So that's why it does make it a little bit more complicated. So we make this first observation. If you go into the store and apple prices are $1, and then next week you go to the store and apple prices are now $2, the third week you go to the store and apple prices are $3, what do we have taking place there? Obviously, prices going up, and most of you know by now that's inflation taking place. But that's the effect. We want to know, well, what is the cause of the inflation? So that's where, again, you guys are going to hypothesize, just like Isaac Newton did, of what caused that inflation. So I want you guys to write it down on your worksheet over here. You have, what are some hypotheses to why the apple prices are going up from week to week? And you guys, again, should be filling in this worksheet as we go along. Why don't people fall off the planet? Obviously gravity. How do we know this? Isaac Newton. How's it related to the apple? Again, Isaac Newton, or we were taught at this, and the scientific method. So over here we have the inflation taking place. Now you're making 5 hypotheses. So I want you to write those 5 hypotheses down. What could potentially be causing that price of that apple to be going up? So one hypothesis could be, well, maybe there was a storm that came through and destroyed all the apples, all right? So that's a great hypothesis. Now, is that demand or is that supply? Well, that would be a supply situation. We'll learn more about supply and demand later on, but that's a supply situation where the supply was damaged. So you guys come up with at least 4 other hypotheses, fill that in, and then go ahead and when we submit this worksheet, you're going to have that filled in, all right? So I think we briefly talked about these four people here. They're the most important economists in the United States and probably the world. They're the Federal Reserve Chair people. This is Jeremy Powell. This is Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, and Alan Greenspan. You should definitely be familiar with them. You definitely should know who Jay Powell is. He's, again, the Federal Reserve Chairperson, which controls interest rates and tries to control inflation and unemployment. So filling in your worksheet over here, what are economists' two roles? Well, they're a scientist where they try to explain the world the way it is, and then they try and improve it. The scientific portion is where everyone agrees on the scientific part. If we increase the money supply, we learned in class, remember when we did the auction, if you increase the money supply, what do you get? We get inflation. Everyone knows that. Every economist would agree with that. Now, how you fight inflation is another thing. Should you increase interest rates or should you do other things to fight inflation? Right now, we have a lot of inflation going on. You guys know with the gas prices. Some of that's because of the Russia-Ukraine situation going on. Some of that's other things. Some of that's demand. A lot of people are driving more. Some of it is other supply constraints, things of that sort. So the policy part is not where everyone agrees. So that's where Republicans and Democrats fight about economic policy. But the scientific part is where everyone agrees. All right, again, we talked about the scientific method. Why do we use assumptions in economics? We use assumptions in economics because we have to isolate variables. We can't analyze every variable. Remember, there's thousands of variables going on in the economy, and it would be impossible to try and look at every possible situation. So in economics, just like science, we isolate certain variables and we make assumptions based on other things. All right. Again, we use models. Why do we use models? Because it makes it easier for us to understand. Just like a map, it makes it easier to follow, look at the directions, and a skeleton is easier to diagnose. Or when you're in a patient with a doctor in the doctor's office, the doctor will bring out the skeleton and explain it to you. So we use models in economics to make it easier for us to understand. All right, so usually in class I ask you guys, if you're going to start a company, what are some of the things you would do first when starting a company? So why don't you guys go ahead and fill those things in. Would you hire employees? Would you rent out some space? What would you do? So you guys can pause this video and fill out what are 5 things you would do when you first started a company. The other thing is that I want you to fill in. If you had 2 choices to start a company, if you started a company, what would you do there? Or if you went to work for a company and you got your first paycheck, what would you spend that money on? So go ahead and fill those things in. You just got your big paycheck, $5,000. What are you going to spend your money on? And fill that in over here. All right, once you have, again, I want you to just maybe pause the video, fill these 5 things in, fill these 5 things in. And once you have that filled in, we have a bunch of different things filled in here. Now the question is, well, how are we going to put that into a model? All right. Let's see if I can get the filled in version of this. All right, so these are some of the things that you probably could have filled in. You could hire employees, that's your labor. You could find some retail space, that's land, get equipment, etc. Over here, you guys are going to buy clothes, go to a restaurant. Everyone, all my students are very responsible. They're going to invest, pay down debt. No one's going to go out and spend that money when they get their first paycheck. So now that we have all these economic things going on here, how can we put that into a model? We want to actually, as an economist, we want to model that. So we can model it. It's called the circular flow model. And that's the first model we're going to cover. It's the easiest model in pretty much all of economics that we're going to walk you through over here. So this page you guys are going to fill in is the circular flow model. There's going to be 2 variables. There's going to be firms and households. So let me go ahead and play this video. This is also in your textbook. So the 2 variables in the circular flow model, number 1 is going to be households, and number 2 is going to be firms. All right. So we want to see how resources flow around between households and firms. All right. The 2 markets up here is the market for goods and services, and the market down here for production. That's generally usually what I just write in there. So you guys can write that as well. So households typically provide services for firms, and firms provide services or goods to households. All right. I usually talk a little bit faster than I write. All right, so households, what are they going to get from firms? They're going to spend money, so that money is going to go out of firms, and that money is going to flow into, or sorry, from households into firms. When money goes into a firm, that's a revenue. Hopefully you guys, you business majors, know that revenue is on your income statement. Revenue minus expenses equals net income. So revenue is what goes into a firm. It's the money that they make. And firms are going to have to give households goods or services sold, and goods or services bought. Okay. Again, most of you guys being business majors, you should know the income statement. Revenue minus expenses equals net income, or profit, or earnings. They mean the same thing. All right, goods and services sold is what's going out. Make sure you have the arrows going correctly. That's what's going out of firms. And goods and services going in is bought. Okay, down here, what a household's going to give? Well, they have to give something to firms. They can give their labor, they can give land, or they can give capital. Capital in economics is physical capital, like machines. It's not financial capital. All right. So that's what households give over to firms, and this over here is called factors of production. Yeah, again, I have this memorized. You guys on the test I could give this to you on the test. You can use your notes, so obviously just take good notes. Sometimes students, it's amazing what students will get this wrong because they didn't take the notes and fill it in. So this should be easy points if I give it to you. What are firms giving out? Well, if you're giving your labor, you would be paid wages. If you're giving land, you're going to be paid rent. And capital would be profits. Okay, and then over here would be income going in. All right. So the circular flow model, you guys all should have that's mine filled in, but this is in the textbook. So if you look at the textbook, the same diagram is there. All right. So for this video, which will be due Tuesday, I just want you to complete these first 2 pages. All right. So we have this page right here, should be filled in, and the circular flow page should be filled in. Just go ahead and take a picture or a screenshot and submit it into Canvas, and we should be good there. On the next video, which I'll make due Thursday, is going to be the production possibility frontier. Thank you very much, and I'll get started on that next video.